Joseph Stalin was a paranoid architect of mass graves who trusted absolutely no one. He purged his loyal generals, executed his closest allies, and saw assassins lurking in every shadow. Yet, there was one man whose shadow Stalin himself hesitated to step on: Georgy Zhukov. History remembers him as the flawless titan of the Soviet Union, the invincible commander who ground the Nazi war machine into the blood-soaked dirt of Berlin. But if you strip away the polished, state-sanctioned mythology, you won't find a communist saint. You will find a ruthless, vain pragmatist who learned early that in the Russian Empire, mercy was a fatal disease. To understand the ice-cold strategist who would one day send millions of men to their deaths without a second thought, you have to look at the freezing mud of Strelkovka in 1896. Zhukov wasn't born into glory. He was born into the kind of crushing, forgotten poverty that slowly strips away a person's humanity. The Russian winter was so lethal that the infant Zhukov spent his first days living on top of a baking masonry stove, the only place in his family's rotting, drafty hut warm enough to keep his blood flowing. He inherited nothing from his absentee father, but from his mother, a formidable peasant woman known to carry 170-pound sacks of grain without breaking a sweat, he inherited a terrifying physical endurance. He was built like a vault, endowed with a supernatural nervous system that would later keep his heart beating steadily while other generals collapsed under the paralyzing terror of Stalin's gaze. Yet, this supposed champion of the proletariat actually despised peasant life. By the time he was a teenager working in a Moscow workshop, Zhukov had become a pompous apprentice furrier. He didn't want to overthrow the rich, he desperately wanted to join them. He chased rubles, status, and the faint scent of cheap cologne, trying to permanently wash away the stench of his village. When the First World War ignited in 1914, he was offered a golden ticket out of the slaughter. His uncle prepared a hefty bribe to buy a fake medical exemption. An idealistic man would have marched to the front for the Tsar. A smart man would have taken the bribe. Zhukov refused the money for a completely different reason: sheer, toxic vanity. The thought of his peers whispering that he was a coward horrified him far more than German artillery. He rode into the meat grinder of World War I simply to protect his fragile ego. The imperial cavalry quickly beat the arrogance out of him. Under the thumb of a sadistic drill sergeant missing half a finger, Zhukov was tortured, humiliated, and pushed to the brink of physical collapse. But instead of breaking, the young man adapted to the brutal arithmetic of Russian authority. Organizing a midnight ambush, Zhukov and a few recruits cornered the sergeant in the dark, threw a thick sack over his head, and savagely beat him. It was a dark, profound revelation for Zhukov. Violence perfectly applied and without witnesses solves what words cannot. On the front lines, he transformed into an apex predator. He didn't win his medals for glamorous romantic cavalry charges. He earned them by crawling through frozen mud in the dead of night, hunting human prey. He specialized in kidnapping German officers, waiting for hours in the freezing dark, silencing them with a massive hand and dragging them back alive for interrogation. But in 1916, the brutal reality of industrial war caught up with him. A hidden landmine blew him from his horse, leaving him half-deaf in the snow. Ironically, that explosion was a stroke of absolute luck. Confined to a rear echelon hospital bed, he was safely removed from the front lines just as the Imperial Army began to collapse into mutiny, executing their own officers in the trenches. The vain teenager who wanted to be a rich tradesman died in that blast. The man who walked out of that hospital was a cold-blooded survivor. He wasn't born a hero, he was forged into a weapon, entirely ready for the coming apocalypse of the Russian Revolution.